The road leading up to the mountain was desolate, flanked by jagged cliffs on one side and a sheer drop into an abyss of mist on the other. I had been traveling for days, my purpose clear yet heavy in my chest. The silent monastery wasn't a place one visited casually. Stories whispered in villages warned of its eerie silence and the monks who never spoke, their lips sealed by some ancient vow. I wasn't here for answers, though at least not the kind people typically sought from the monks. My sister Lily had disappeared 6 months ago, her last letter hinting at this place. "There's something here," she'd written, her words cryptic yet urgent. "I think it's the truth we've been searching for." And then, nothing. The final stretch of the journey was a narrow, winding path that seemed to vanish into the clouds. The air grew colder with every step, my breath condensing into puffs of mist. As I climbed higher, the weight of the silence pressed down on me. Not even the wind dared disturb this place. When the monastery came into view, it was both awe-inspiring and foreboding. Its towering spires reached toward the heavens, carved from dark stone that seemed to drink in the light. The massive doors were adorned with intricate engravings of scenes I couldn't decipher, figures cloaked in shadow, holding symbols I didn't recognize. I hesitated at the entrance, my hand hovering over the heavy iron knocker. A part of me wanted to turn back, to leave this place and its mysteries buried. But Lily's face flashed in my mind, her laughter, her curiosity that often got her into trouble. Taking a deep breath, I knocked. The sound echoed like a thunderclap, and then nothing. I waited, my heart pounding, until finally the doors creaked open on their own. No one greeted me. The interior was dimly lit by flickering torches, their flames casting long, shifting shadows across the stone walls. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no reply. I stepped inside, the doors groaning shut behind me. The silence here was unnatural, almost alive. It wrapped around me, muting even the sound of my footsteps. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and incense, and as I ventured deeper, I noticed the monks. They were everywhere, standing in alcoves, sitting cross-legged in meditation, walking slowly through the halls. All of them wore simple robes of deep crimson, their faces obscured by hoods. None of them acknowledged me, their heads bowed in a collective, unbroken silence. "Excuse me," I said, approaching one of them. He didn't respond, his hands clasped in prayer. I tried another and another, but the result was the same. Frustration bubbled in my chest, and then I saw it. A mural spanning the length of the main hall, its details so vivid it seemed to shift as I moved closer. It depicted a story, an ancient one, if the faded colors were any indication. There were people gathered around a well, their faces twisted in agony as shadows poured from its depths. Above them, a figure loomed, faceless and immense, its hands raised as if casting judgment. "What is this place?" I murmured, my voice barely audible in the suffocating silence. A soft rustle behind me made me whirl around. A monk stood there, his face hidden beneath his hood. In his hands he held a parchment, which he extended toward me. I took it cautiously, my fingers brushing against the rough fabric of his robe. The parchment bore a single line of text, written in ink that shimmered like liquid silver. "To find what you seek, you must first lose yourself." The monk turned and walked away before I could ask anything, leaving me alone with the cryptic message and the oppressive weight of the monastery's secrets. The parchment in my hands felt heavier than it should, the shimmering text pulling at my mind like an unanswered question. "Lose myself?" I whispered, the words echoing faintly in the cavernous hall. The monk who had given me the parchment had disappeared into the shadows, leaving me utterly alone. Determined, I pressed forward, following the faint light of the torches lining the stone walls. The air seemed to hum, a low vibration I could feel in my bones but couldn't hear. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, its domed ceiling painted with constellations I didn't recognize. In the center of the room was a well, much like the one in the mural. The stones around its edge were worn smooth, and a faint mist rose from its depths, swirling like ghostly tendrils. I approached cautiously, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Something about the well felt alive, as if it were waiting for me. I leaned over the edge, peering into the darkness below. At first, I saw nothing but shadow, but then a face appeared. It was Lily. Her eyes were wide with fear, her mouth open as if screaming, but no sound came. Her image rippled like water, and then she was gone. I staggered back, my heart pounding. "Lily!" I shouted into the well, my voice cracking. "Are you there?" The mist thickened, curling around my ankles and pulling me closer to the well. I resisted, digging my heels into the stone floor. But then, the humming grew louder, and the shadows around the chamber began to shift. Figures emerged from the darkness, their forms cloaked in the same crimson robes as the monks. But these weren't the serene, meditative monks I'd seen before. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, and their faces, when they raised their heads, were blank. No eyes, no mouths, just smooth, featureless skin. Panic surged through me as they closed in, their silent presence suffocating. I turned to run, but found myself rooted to the spot, the mist wrapping tighter around my legs. "Let me go," I cried, struggling against the unseen force. And then a voice soft yet commanding echoed through the chamber. "Why have you come here?" The figures stopped, their heads tilting as if listening. The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, reverberating in my skull. "I'm looking for my sister," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "She came here. Her name is Lily. Do you know where she is?" The voice was silent for a moment, and then it spoke again, slower this time. "To find her, you must confront what you fear most." The mist receded, and the figures melted back into the shadows. I stumbled forward, gasping for air, as the well began to glow faintly. The light emanating from it was soft and golden, like the break of dawn, and as I peered into its depths again, I saw a staircase spiraling downward. This was it, the way forward. Taking a deep breath, I stepped over the edge and began to descend. The air grew warmer as I moved deeper, the golden light illuminating the smooth stone walls. The humming sound grew louder, resonating through my entire body, but I pressed on. After what felt like an eternity, I reached the bottom. The staircase opened into a smaller chamber, its walls lined with mirrors. At the center was a single chair, and sitting in it was Lily. "Lily!" I cried, rushing toward her. She didn't move. Her eyes were closed, her face pale, and she seemed to be in some kind of trance. As I got closer, I noticed the strange markings etched into the floor around her, a series of intricate symbols that glowed faintly. Before I could touch her, the voice returned. "She is bound by her choices as you are bound by yours." "What does that mean?" I demanded, spinning around to find the source of the voice. "Let her go." "To free her, you must give up something in return," the voice said, calm yet unyielding. "What do you want?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. The mirrors around the room flickered, and my reflection stared back at me, not as I was, but as I could have been. I saw myself older, wiser, standing in a peaceful field with Lily beside me, smiling. Another mirror showed me alone, walking a desolate road with a heavy burden on my back. Each reflection was a choice, a path I could take. "Choose," the voice said. The air grew heavier, the symbols around Lily glowing brighter. My time was running out, and the weight of the decision pressed down on me. I stood there, frozen, surrounded by the mirrors that seemed to show endless versions of myself, each one a possibility, a reflection of a life I might lead depending on the choice I made. but the question was simple. What was I willing to sacrifice to save Lily? The silence in the room was deafening, a quiet so deep it seemed to swallow my thoughts. I turned back to Lily, still seated in the chair, her face pale and unmoving. The golden light flickered in the mirrors, casting strange shadows that seemed to dance around me. "Choose," the voice repeated, its tone not demanding, but somehow final. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm the rising panic in my chest. The reflections stared back at me, each one showing a different life, a different choice, but none of them felt like mine. They were all paths that led me away from the truth, away from Lily. I reached out, touching the surface of one of the mirrors. My reflection smirked back at me, its eyes filled with a cold detachment. A version of myself who had abandoned hope, who had let go of love and connection. "No," I whispered to myself, "that's not who I am." Turning away from that reflection, I moved to the next. It was an image of a future with Lily, the two of us walking side by side in a sunlit meadow, a place of peace and happiness. But I felt a tug at my heart. This version of myself was not fully alive. The price of that life was a soul that had been diminished, a part of me that would never be whole. I took a step back. This isn't it either. The third reflection showed me alone, carrying a heavy weight on my back. It was a life of burden, of never-ending struggle, but there was something strangely familiar about it. I had been carrying burdens for years, ever since Lily's disappearance. Perhaps this was the truth, that I had been bound by grief and fear, unwilling to face the consequences of losing her. But now, something shifted inside me. The guilt, the fear, the uncertainty they didn't have to define me. I didn't have to choose between a life of sacrifice and a life of emptiness. I turned to the final reflection, the one that showed a version of myself standing in front of Lily, both of us facing the unknown together. There were no promises of an easy life, no guarantees of safety or happiness, but there was something I hadn't seen in the other reflections. Love. Not the kind of love that required sacrifice, but the kind that offered hope. "I choose you, Lily," I whispered. "I choose us." With that, the mirrors shattered, their pieces falling to the ground like shards of forgotten dreams. The golden light from the symbols around Lily grew brighter, and for a moment, everything was still. Then, Lily's eyes fluttered open. "Lily," I gasped, rushing to her side. She blinked up at me, confusion clouding her face. Where am I?" she murmured, her voice hoarse. I pulled her into my arms, relief flooding through me. "You're safe," I said, my voice trembling. "You're free now." The symbols on the floor faded, and the humming sound that had filled the air began to quiet. The oppressive weight of the monastery lifted, and for the first time since I had entered, the silence felt peaceful, not suffocating. Lily's gaze shifted around the room, taking in the broken mirrors and the faint glow still lingering in the air. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think we were meant to face our fears," I said, my voice steadying, "to let go of what holds us back." She smiled softly, her hand reaching out to touch mine. "I knew you'd come for me." The air around us seemed to shift, a warmth replacing the coldness that had once enveloped the monastery. As we stood there, the silence no longer felt like a prison. It felt like peace, a peace we had both been seeking, without knowing it. Together, we left the chamber, stepping into the light of a new beginning. The monastery, once an imposing structure, now seemed like nothing more than a distant memory, a place where we had been forced to confront our deepest fears. But we had emerged stronger, together. The path ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time in months I felt certain. Whatever came next, we would face it side by side. The monastery had given us something invaluable, not answers, not resolutions, but a chance to rebuild, to start anew. And as the sun began to set behind the mountain, casting its golden glow over the path before us, I knew one thing for certain. The journey was far from over, but now we would walk it together, in silence and in strength.